For 10 years, I was the picture of perfection. Or at least that's what people saw when they looked at me. I was the wife of a man everyone admired, charming, successful, and effortlessly confident. We lived in a glass mansion that overlooked the city skyline, the kind of place that made people lower their voices when they passed by. From the outside, it looked like a dream. But dreams, I've learned, are often just expensive illusions. Every morning, I woke up before him, making sure his coffee was brewed exactly the way he liked. Dark roast, 1 sugar, no cream. He'd kiss my cheek absently, scrolling through his phone, already halfway lost in his empire before the day even began. I'd smile, pretending not to notice the distance in his eyes, the way he spoke to me as if I were part of the decor. At parties, he'd introduce me like a prized possession, my beautiful wife, and everyone would smile, whispering envy behind crystal glasses. I learned to pose, to laugh at his jokes even when they cut me, to glow under chandeliers while feeling hollow inside. The other wives envied my life, but envy is blind to truth. They didn't see how often I dined alone, or how his praise had slowly turned into polite indifference. Our anniversary photos hung in gold frames across the hallway, each one marking another year of love that had faded quietly beneath the weight of success. Sometimes I'd stare at them and wonder when we stopped being partners and became a performance. He had his world, the business meetings, the travel, the headlines, and I had mine, hosting, smiling, pretending. I thought being his wife meant being part of something powerful, but it started to feel more like being part of his brand. Late at night, when the city lights painted patterns across our bedroom, I'd lie awake listening to him breathe, wondering if he even remembered who I used to be before him. I missed the woman who dreamed for herself, not for his approval. The woman who once laughed freely, who didn't check her reflection for cracks before stepping into a room. Still, I told myself it was normal. That every marriage cooled over time, that maybe this emptiness was just what comfort looked like after the spark settled. But somewhere deep down, I knew better. I could feel something shifting. The way he avoided my gaze when I spoke. The way his compliments sounded rehearsed. The way silence began to fill our house like fog. I had everything, and yet I was disappearing. Slowly, beautifully, invisibly. I just didn't realize how much farther I still had to fall. When he suggested a grand gala for our 10th anniversary, my heart leapt. I took it as a sign that maybe, after all the distance, he wanted to celebrate us again. I threw myself into every detail, from the silver invitations embossed with our initials to the cascading orchids that would drape across the ballroom. I wanted the night to remind him who we were before ambition swallowed us whole. I spent weeks coordinating with designers, florists, and chefs, making sure everything reflected the life we'd built together. Every choice was personal. The champagne we drank on our honeymoon, the same pianist who had played at our wedding. I wanted to create not just a party, but a memory we could both hold on to. But as the date drew closer, something in him felt off. He was polite, even indulgent, but distant. When I tried to share updates, his responses were clipped, distracted. "Whatever you think is best," he'd say without looking up from his phone. One afternoon, while I was reviewing the seating chart, I overheard him on a call, laughing, and that deep, confident laugh I hadn't heard in months. The warmth in his voice stung because it wasn't for me anymore. He spoke softly, almost playfully, to someone I didn't know. When I entered the room, his expression hardened, and the laughter died instantly. "Business," he said, slipping his phone into his pocket. His tone left no room for questions. The night before the event, I stood in the middle of the ballroom as the final touches came together. Chandeliers glittering like constellations, tables lined with candles that shimmered against mirrored surfaces. It was everything I'd imagined. I took a slow breath, trying to believe this would be the moment that brought us back. Maybe he'd see all this effort, and remember that beneath the luxury, I was still the woman who loved him. But when he arrived to preview the space, his first words weren't what I hoped for. "It's fine," he said flatly, scanning the room as if it were a business project. "Just make sure the photographers get my speech angle right." My throat tightened, but I smiled anyway. "Of course," I replied, hiding the tremor in my voice. That night, as I laid out my gown, An elegant silver dress he once said made me look like moonlight. I caught my reflection in the mirror. My hands trembled slightly as I fastened my earrings. I whispered to myself, "Tomorrow will be different. He'll see me again." I wanted to believe that love could still be revived with beauty, effort, and hope. But even then, a quiet unease curled in my chest, a warning I chose to ignore. Something was wrong, and tomorrow, the world would see it before I did. The ballroom shimmered that night, gold light spilling across polished marble, violins weaving through the hum of laughter and clinking glasses. Every detail sparkled like the version of my life I'd built so carefully. Guests mingled in designer gowns. Champagne flowed like liquid pride. And for a fleeting moment, I let myself believe that all the cracks could stay hidden beneath the glitter. My husband looked every bit the man people admired, commanding, elegant, perfectly composed. When he reached for my hand before stepping onto the stage, I mistook it for affection. It was just choreography. His voice boomed through the speakers, deep and confident. 10 years, he began, smiling for the cameras. 10 long years of marriage, and she's still here somehow. Laughter rippled through the crowd, and I smiled on cue, though my stomach tightened. His hand rested on my shoulder, firm, almost possessive. "You all know how patient my wife is. She puts up with me, and let's be honest, without me, she wouldn't have made it through her first business meeting, let alone this event." Another round of laughter. I felt it cut through me like glass. I wanted to disappear, but the flashes of cameras pinned me in place. My smile trembled. I tried to laugh along, but the air in the room shifted. People exchanging glances, the subtle tilt of sympathy and curiosity. He continued, eyes glittering with smugness. "But I must admit, I've had some help lately. Someone who really gets my vision." His tone softened, his gaze drifting toward the corner of the room. I followed it, to a woman I hadn't noticed before. Young, radiant, in a sleek red dress that caught the light like fire. His new business partner. My throat went dry. He lifted his glass toward her. "To partnerships, old and new." The audience chuckled, but the undercurrent was unmistakable. She smiled, almost shyly, but there was a spark in her eyes that told me she knew exactly what she represented. My pulse pounded in my ears. I could hear whispers spreading like wildfire. "Isn't that his new associate? He's bold, isn't he? Poor thing." I stood there frozen, every muscle locked in polite agony. My hands clutched the stem of my glass until it nearly cracked. He wrapped up his speech with effortless charm, thanked everyone for coming, and kissed my cheek. A cold, performative gesture for the cameras. The smell of his cologne mixed with the sting of humiliation, making it hard to breathe. As the music swelled again, guests resumed mingling, but I could feel their eyes following me, pitying, judging, entertained. A woman in pearls leaned over to whisper something to her friend, both of them glancing at me before feigning smiles. My cheeks burned, but I kept standing, rigid, smiling as though my heart hadn't just been paraded and crushed under designer shoes. When he returned to the crowd, he didn't look at me. He went straight to her. I watched, disbelief dissolving into a sickening clarity, as he leaned in close, his hand brushing her arm casually, intimately. She laughed, that light, tinkling laugh that once belonged to me. Cameras flashed again. Somewhere in that crowd, my dignity turned into content. I excused myself quietly, walking toward the exit as though I were simply taking a breath of fresh air. Each step felt heavier than the last, my heels clicking like tiny betrayals against the marble floor. The night air outside was cold, sharp against my skin. I clutched the railing, looking down at the city that sparkled beneath me, a city that had just watched me unravel. Inside, the party raged on. Music, laughter, applause, all of it muffled by the ache in my chest. I realized then that he hadn't just humiliated me. He'd done it deliberately, calculatingly, knowing I'd stand there smiling while he stripped away my pride in front of everyone. That was his power. And until that moment, I had given it to him willingly. But as I stood in the darkness, tears tracing lines through my makeup, something inside me shifted. For the first time in years, the illusion shattered. The perfect wife, The beautiful accessory, the silent supporter. She was gone. What remained was raw, broken, but quietly alive. He thought he'd won that night. He had no idea he'd just created the woman who would one day destroy everything he stood for. I barely remember how I reached the suite. My heels wobbled on the marble as I stumbled through the corridor. My vision blurred by tears I refused to let fall in public. The noise of the gala was still echoing from downstairs. Laughter, music, the hollow rhythm of applause that no longer belonged to me. Once inside, I slammed the bathroom door and slid down against it, the weight of silence crashing over me. My reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, eyes swollen, lipstick smudged, the diamond necklace glinting cruelly against trembling skin. His words replayed over and over, each one cutting deeper. She wouldn't have made it without me. I pressed my palms to my ears, as if I could drown out the memory. My phone vibrated beside me, messages flooding in. "Are you okay?" He was out of line. "Don't let it ruin your night." Their pity suffocated me. I couldn't reply. What could I say? That my husband had turned me into a joke in front of everyone I knew? That the man who once swore to protect me now fed my humiliation to strangers for entertainment? I wanted to scream, to throw something, to feel anything other than this hollow ache. Instead, I cried quietly. The kind of crying that doesn't sound like sobs, but like breathing gone wrong. My mascara ran in dark rivers down my cheeks, staining the ivory silk of my gown. The same gown I'd chosen so carefully, the one he'd barely noticed. Through the thin hotel walls, I could still hear faint echoes of laughter. His laughter, it made me sick. I stood, gripping the edge of the sink to steady myself. My dress caught on the cabinet, tearing slightly at the seam. I stared at the rip, a small, ugly wound on something beautiful, and thought how perfectly it mirrored me. Everything around me looked flawless, but I was unraveling quietly at the edges. When I finally stepped out of the bathroom, the suite felt too bright, too sterile. I gathered my purse, my coat, and whatever remained of my dignity. The mirror by the door caught my reflection one last time, eyes red, lipstick ruined, heart broken. I almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked fragile, yes, but there was something fierce in her stillness, a whisper of defiance beneath the devastation. Downstairs, the music thundered as I passed the ballroom entrance. A waiter glanced at me, his eyes widening when he noticed the torn fabric trailing behind me. I didn't care. Let them see. Let them whisper. My husband was laughing somewhere inside, surrounded by people who believed his charm was gold. I pushed through the hotel's glass doors and stepped into the cold night air. The wind hit my face like truth. Sharp, clean, undeniable. For the first time that evening, I breathed without pretending. My world had collapsed, but beneath the ruin, something unfamiliar stirred. I didn't know it yet, but this was the moment I began to rebuild. Not for him, but for me. The morning after the gala, sunlight spilled into the bedroom as if mocking me. My husband hummed while reading the financial news, perfectly composed, as though the night before had never happened. I sat across from him at the breakfast table, the taste of coffee bitter in my mouth. He didn't mention the gala, not even a careless apology. Instead, he commented on a market report and asked if I could call the decorator about new office drapes. The detachment was so complete, it almost felt rehearsed. I waited for acknowledgement, for any hint of remorse, but when I finally whispered, "You embarrassed me," he looked up, amused. "Oh, don't be dramatic," he said, dismissing my words with a flick of his hand. People laughed. That's what these events are for. Entertainment. I stared at him, unable to recognize the man I'd once loved. He returned to his tablet, indifferent, while my heart clenched so tightly I could barely breathe. Days passed in a blur of silence. He came and went as he pleased, radiating power and confidence while I drifted through the house like a ghost haunting her own life. Friends texted to check on me, but I couldn't bear to answer. Every conversation would force me to relive the humiliation, and I wasn't ready for that. I smiled at the staff, gave polite answers, played the role of the composed wife. Inside, I was unraveling quietly, piece by piece. One evening, after he'd fallen asleep, I sat at my vanity, staring at my reflection. The diamonds on my dresser sparkled faintly in the low light, each one a reminder of the cage I'd mistaken for comfort. I opened my laptop and began checking accounts, joint savings, investments, property deeds. The truth sank like a stone in my stomach. Almost everything was under his name. Even the jewelry, the cars, the house, all gifts legally tied to him. I felt foolish, naive. I'd trusted him completely, believing that love meant safety. It didn't. It meant dependence. And dependence meant control. For a moment, helplessness swallowed me whole. My hands shook as I scrolled through page after page of his empire. An empire I had unknowingly helped build through years of quiet support, only to realize I had no stake in it. He had built the walls and I had furnished the cage. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. Only one thought echoed. He owns everything, even my silence. But then, beneath the despair, something shifted. A small, steady spark, faint but unmistakable. If he could plan so carefully to protect himself, so could I. I closed the laptop slowly, wiping my tears. I would not be his ornament anymore. I would learn. I would rebuild, quietly, patiently. Just as he had once underestimated me, so would the world. They would see me smile and think I'd accepted my place. They would be wrong. As I turned off the lights and slipped into bed beside him, his breathing steady and unaware, I stared into the darkness and made myself a silent promise. One day, he would lose everything he took for granted, starting with me. It started with an old name flashing across my phone screen. Marianne. My mentor from years ago, before marriage had swallowed my ambitions whole. I hesitated before answering, embarrassed by how small I'd allowed myself to become. But Marianne's voice hadn't changed, warm, sharp, and honest. "I saw the photos," she said softly. "You don't deserve that kind of humiliation. Maybe it's time you remembered who you are." Her words hit harder than any insult my husband ever threw. I wasn't just his wife. I had once been someone who dreamed, created, built. Maybe I could be that again. That night, I dug out my old design portfolio from a dusty storage box. The sketches were dated, but my heart raced flipping through them. Colors, textures, spaces. It all came flooding back. I had spent years helping him design the perfect image of success, but my own creativity had been buried under his shadow. Marianne saw potential. "Start small," she said. "Anonymous if you must. Just start." So, I did. I created a new online profile under a pseudonym, Lena Grace. The name felt like breathing again. I began freelancing quietly, offering interior redesign consultations to small startups and boutique cafes. The thrill of each project reignited something fierce in me. I stayed up late sketching layouts, hunting deals, running numbers. The same instincts that once helped my husband make shrewd investments now guided me, but this time for myself. When the first client sent a glowing testimonial and payment hit my hidden account, I cried. Not from sadness, from proof. I could still build something, week by week, small wins stacked. A boutique in the city posted photos of my work online. Another client recommended me to her cousin. My designs started circulating quietly in the local design community. Every new project became both a secret rebellion and a lifeline. I learned to smile at my husband's smug remarks about women and money while silently doubling my client list. Each compliment he got about our home's elegance felt like poetic irony. He had no idea. I'd been quietly building my own brand under his nose. Marianne called one evening after seeing my latest project go viral on a small design forum. "You've still got it?" she laughed. "More than that, you've got momentum." I looked around the house, the same gilded prison that once mocked me, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped. I felt ready. My secret world was growing, brick by brick, and though I moved in silence, every success whispered a promise. I was no longer invisible. I was just getting started. It happened on an ordinary afternoon that would change everything. I was meeting a boutique owner at a downtown cafe to finalize a design plan when a man at the next table struck up a conversation. He had noticed my sketches, intricate modern layouts for a penthouse redesign. "That's impressive," he said, sliding his card toward me. Ethan Marlowe, Marlowe Investments. I'd heard the name before. He was one of the city's rising real estate players. known for transforming distressed properties into multi-million-dollar showcases. His tone was polite but intrigued. "You have an eye for value," he added. I thanked him, pretending to be just another consultant. He had no idea who I really was, or whose wife. A week later, Ethan called, asking if I'd consider consulting on a luxury renovation he was leading. It was risky. My pseudonym barely protected me, but curiosity outweighed fear. We met in a marble-clad office overlooking the skyline. He laid out blueprints for a high-end property on the riverfront, asking what I'd change. Without overthinking, I started sketching alternatives, pointing out how light and space could increase both emotional appeal and perceived value. When I looked up, he was watching me, impressed. "You just increased that property's potential by $500,000, he said with a grin. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as someone's accessory, but as someone indispensable. Word spread quickly in his circle. Within months, Lena Grace became the quiet name behind several stunning redesigns that caught the attention of luxury investors and developers. My inbox filled with offers, penthouses, boutique hotels, even estate revamps. My hidden account balance grew faster than I could track. I reinvested carefully, following the strategies I'd learned during years of listening to my husband boast about deals. The irony was delicious. I had absorbed every lesson he'd flaunted, and now I was applying them better than he ever did. Ethan remained a professional ally, but became an anchor too, someone who respected my talent without knowing my past. At charity galas and industry dinners, I began appearing by his side as a creative consultant, dressed with quiet confidence. My husband's friends were often there, greeting me with polite curiosity, never realizing the anonymous designer behind the city's newest architectural buzz was the woman he'd humiliated. Once, I caught my husband across the room at a networking event, his arm around his new partner. His eyes flickered when he saw me laughing with Ethan, radiant and calm. He couldn't place me, not in this new light. That moment alone was worth every sleepless night I'd endured. As projects expanded, Ethan offered me a partnership stake in a boutique real estate firm he was forming. My designs and instincts had directly influenced millions in profit, and he wanted me on board. It felt surreal signing those papers. My own company shares, my own authority, my own future. I could almost hear my husband's voice in the back of my mind. "You wouldn't survive without me." Oh, how wrong he'd been. That night, I stood on the terrace of my newest project, a luxury penthouse overlooking the city lights. The air was cool, the skyline glittering with opportunity. Somewhere down there, he still believed he ruled this world. He had no idea that the woman he dismissed as nothing had quietly stepped into his territory, stronger, wiser, and far wealthier than before. I smiled to myself, whispering into the wind. "You built your empire on arrogance. I'm building mine on purpose." And for the first time in my life, power didn't feel borrowed. It felt earned. Operating under Lena Grace, I became a whisper in the city's financial circles, the kind of name that appeared only on contracts, never on headlines. Anonymity became my armor. Every project, every deal, every calculated risk brought me closer to a quiet empire of my own. I learned to move like smoke, unseen but everywhere. My portfolio grew from a few consulting payments to partial ownerships in boutique hotels, upscale condos, and renovation startups. But it wasn't until I started looking into corporate equity that the game changed entirely. Late one evening, while reviewing market reports, I noticed familiar names, firms my husband's company partnered with, vendors who supplied his projects, holding groups that funded his ventures. I stared at the screen for a long moment, realization dawning like a slow electric sunrise. These were arteries feeding his empire. If I bought into them, even silently, I'd control the pulse that kept his world alive. I felt a surge of adrenaline, not from vengeance alone, but from strategy. This wasn't about destroying him. It was about transcending him. Using shell companies and private investment vehicles, I began purchasing small but meaningful stakes. A luxury material supplier here, a logistics firm there, a quiet share in a bank his company relied on for loans. Each move was modest, unnoticeable in isolation, but together, they formed a web that subtly curved around his operations. I called it the Circle. My mentor, now my silent advisor, guided me through every contract. "Stay invisible," he warned. "Power is sharpest when unseen." I smiled. I understood that now better than anyone. Months passed. My husband's company continued to boast in the media, flaunting partnerships and acquisitions that I secretly had a hand in approving. Sometimes when I read articles quoting him as a visionary leader, I almost laughed. He had no idea his empire's new shareholder was the woman he'd once called a pretty accessory. At investor events, I occasionally attended incognito, dressed in minimal black, blending into the background. Once I overheard him praising an anonymous backer who'd stabilized a project's finances. I sipped my champagne quietly. That backer was me. The more I grew, the more detached I felt from the version of myself that used to flinch under his tone. Power rewired something deep within me. I no longer needed his validation. I was crafting justice through economics, one signature at a time. Yet beneath the triumph, there was a tremor of emotion I couldn't shake. Not love, but a strange grief for the years I had handed to him so freely. Now I was reclaiming them, transaction by transaction. One evening, I met with Ethan and my mentor at a rooftop restaurant to finalize a merger that would give us leverage over one of my husband's key suppliers. As the city glittered beneath us, Ethan toasted, "To invisible architects, the ones who design empires others think they own." His words lingered. I felt a quiet thrill. The foundations were shifting, and he didn't even feel the tremor yet. I walked home that night in the cool glow of streetlights, the hum of the city matching my heartbeat. My husband still believed he was untouchable, but his safety net, his partners, his suppliers, even his investors, was slowly becoming mine. He was building castles on sand, and I was quietly buying the beach. The revenge wasn't complete yet, but I could already sense the twist forming on the horizon. When the moment came, it wouldn't just be poetic. It would be financial, public, and irreversible. It began quietly. A delayed shipment here, a canceled investor deal there. My husband, still convinced of his invincibility, brushed off the warning signs as temporary fluctuations. But beneath the surface, the rot was spreading. Suppliers he depended on suddenly renegotiated terms. Investors withdrew interest, citing market uncertainty. I didn't need to orchestrate much. I had simply redirected the currents he had once commanded. His arrogance did the rest. He still strutted through interviews, bragging about record profits and unshakable partnerships. Yet behind closed doors, whispers began to swirl, rumors of debt, mismanagement, and questionable ventures. His loyal partners grew cautious. Some even jumped ship. It was poetic. The same empire he had built by stepping on others was now crumbling beneath the weight of his own ego. I watched from a distance, calm and deliberate. My mentor called it economic karma. I called it balance. The night of the charity gala arrived, an annual event my husband once dominated, where every powerful name in the city gathered under chandeliers and champagne. I hadn't planned to attend, but Ethan insisted. "You've earned your place in that room," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. When we walked in, conversations paused for a heartbeat. I could feel the shift. Eyes followed, recognizing a woman they couldn't quite place but instinctively respected. I wore a sleek emerald gown, understated yet commanding. Ethan and my other partners surrounded me, respected investors, developers, and philanthropists, the kind of company my husband once fought to impress. I caught sight of him across the hall, his posture rigid, his smile brittle. The confident mogul looked smaller now, his once pristine suit slightly ill-fitted, eyes carrying the weight of sleepless nights. Our eyes met. For a fleeting second, confusion flickered across his face, followed by disbelief. Then came the dawning realization that I wasn't just surviving. I was ascending. He approached cautiously, that familiar smirk fighting to stay on his face. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. I simply smiled. "I was invited," I replied, turning toward Ethan as someone from the board introduced me as one of the evening's lead sponsors. The look on his face was priceless, a crack in his carefully curated mask. Cameras flashed. Guests whispered. The balance of power had shifted without a single word of confrontation. Later, As speeches began, I noticed him lingering near the bar, expression darkening with every mention of the investors he'd once counted as allies. Allies now aligned with me. I almost pitied him, almost.